Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 News. The Canadian Grand Prix is here and plenty of teams up and down the grid bringing major upgrades this weekend for Aston Martin, for Williams, and also a couple of small tweaks for Mercedes intending to increase their straight line speed, which is going to be critical if they want to maintain their spot as the second fastest team this weekend. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. Believe we got to 24,000 subs yesterday as well, so greatly appreciate that. Let's dive in. Firstly on Hamilton's contract situation. As you might expect, no real development on this yet. These negotiations always take longer than you would expect. Hamilton says he's in no hurry. A deal's going to get done. I think he wants it to be more than just like a 1+1 deal as well. And I think Mercedes do as well, to make sure that Hamilton, even after he is done driving, whatever that might be, can maintain some sort of Mercedes ambassadorial role. And honestly, who knows how many more years he will still compete for. Alonso's still very competitive. And George Russell says you've only got to look at his skin. He looks like a 25-year-old. I think I've got a few more wrinkles than myself than he has. I think there's still many years left in Lewis, and basically just says why wouldn't he still continue. So yeah, who knows how long Hamilton has left, but the contract negotiations are underway and have made some progress, but not to the extent that there's anything really to talk about on this. We'll say though that the rumours are coming out of Haas right now that the current plan is to extend both Hülkenberg and Magnussen. I think this does make a better sense. Hülkenberg's done a great job I think so far. Magnussen has been somewhat underwhelming this season, but did a solid job last year, and he did of course get the pole position in Brazil. But I'd be surprised if they committed this early to extending these guys. You never know what options might become available, and I don't think the likes of Magnussen is necessarily going to get poached, but still that might be Haas's plan to maintain their lineup going into next season. Quick talk on Charles Leclerc as well, because Ferrari, they don't have anything particularly major this weekend. It's more about optimizing the package they brought in Spain. But again, Leclerc does reaffirm that they just don't know what went wrong with his car when they were losing all that time in qualifying. As he says here, the qualifying Barcelona was particular, maybe he meant peculiar, or maybe this has been misquoted, difficult to say, but you get the picture. We need to understand these things. For now, we don't have a reason, which is a little bit worrying. So, I mean, he said after qualifying there was 100% something wrong with the car, and I think there must have been. I mean, he was losing a couple of tenths every time he tried to turn left. It just wasn't working in that qualifying session, and apparently it then affected him. Well, it obviously affected him in the race because he had to start from the pit lane because they took his car apart and put it back together. But apparently things still weren't perfect in the race either. So yeah, this is tricky because we mentioned the other day that Ferrari think probably that there was no issue with the car. It was a setup issue, which would mean one of the engineers or mechanics was at fault for messing something up between practice and quali. But apparently Ferrari still don't know. So I'm not surprised. It's Ferrari after all, but it's still not a great sign for them this weekend. They should be more competitive here though, for sure. Another major update actually, some of the first images we were getting from the track were images such as this, which shows that the first corner, so this is turn 2 actually here, so you go down into turn 1, turn left, then turn right. This is that long right-hander. It's quite common in battles, especially in wet conditions, to go on from turn 1 to lock up and go off into this runoff area, and then to rejoin at the end of turn 2, where this wall now resides. So you're no longer able to go off turn 1 and then rejoin the track here. You would have to either cut across this section, which seems a bit risky, or you would have to literally do a 180, turn around and come back onto the track. Either way, it's going to make coming back onto the circuit, like imagine you end up over here, you've got to come on almost like back on yourself. I'm not so sure I'm a massive fan of this actually, but it does mean that it punishes any turn 1 issues more severely in the race. You can imagine a circumstance where someone's trying to come back on the track, but there's loads of cars going past and they can't rejoin unsafely. So it makes it pretty challenging actually for the drivers here. So we'll see what they decide to do, but that's a pretty big change actually, because often during the race drivers will end up on this part of the track, especially in wet conditions, as there might well be today and also tomorrow. Sunday we're not so sure, we'll see about that. Also though, Aston Martin, brand new floor, brand new side pod design. Okay, not brand new, a lot of these images look very similar to the previous ones to be honest, but we have some images of some of the starting points of the Venturi tunnels, the top side of the floor which has shifted in its design slightly, but there's nothing major you can really see here. It's more that there are plenty of parts where they've tried to upgrade this part of the car, and this is the upgrade package they are very optimistic about, right? They've made that very clear. And yes, new side pods, new engine cover, new floor, the undercut as well. And this is probably the key point, is that this part of the side pod, usually, I mean previously they didn't have an undercut quite as severe as this. It was more about the almost water slide on the top of the side pod. Now they do have a more severe undercut, which is very much a Red Bull style concept. it's become a thing now where basically every team has abandoned their ideas and everyone is going to look a bit more like a Red Bull upgrade on upgrades, which makes sense. It is what it is. They nailed it. The other teams didn't, and that's how the regulations tend to go. But this is what the side pod now looks like on the Aston Martin, with more of a severe undercut to accelerate the air on the underside, and that's how Red Bull are able to generate quite a lot of performance. So it does seem like the changes that they've made are retaining some of its original DNA with the water slide, as people are calling it, on the top of the side pod, but there's now even more of a Red Bull styled floor and undercut on the side pod as well. So makes sense, but still, this is the upgrade that Aston Martin are very optimistic about. It is a track that should suit them quite well anyway. Alonso was great last year here in qualifying in the wet on the Saturday, and that was in a far worse car than this Aston Martin should be this weekend. Just comparing to the Red Bull, for example, where you guys can see how the undercut on the side pod is somewhat similar to what Aston Martin are now coming up with, and other teams such as Mercedes and even Ferrari have gone a little bit more down this direction over the previous weeks than certainly those teams did at the start of 2022, when it was all over the place and Aston Martin were right at the back of the grid. Williams also with some major changes. Now, I believe these are just for Albon's car, but new floor, new side pods, new engine cover, new halo design, and new rear suspension, brake ducts, and wing end plates. So this might well be their most significant upgrade of the season. Will it do anything? We'll see. We know that their floor isn't particularly well developed. We know that their facilities aren't particularly good. James Vowles has made that clear. He was like, these guys are 20 years behind where we need to be competitive, but they're bringing some new things. We'll see. We already expect Albon to be ahead of Sargent, so if he's massively ahead this weekend, then these upgrades are probably going to be pretty good. Mercedes have a small tweak for their car this weekend, so it's basically the same as what they had in Spain and in Monaco. We believe it's going to be Silverstone where the big upgrade for them is going to arrive. That's what George Russell said not long ago now. I think there's Austria between now and then, but whatever happens, straight line speed performance is very crucial around Canada. We know that last year the Ferrari was quite quick in the hands of Sainz, but it wasn't quick enough in a straight line to even overtake Verstappen. He really had no challenge at the end of that race once he got past, and the Mercedes will be intending to up their straight line speed again. So the package is the same, but they're making an upgrade by removing an outer tip winglet from the side pod wing. So it's this part of the car up here where you guys can see this on other versions, where you've got this little thing that sticks out, and it's used for airflow towards the rear of the car. But apparently Mercedes either think it's redundant, or they think, well, we can actually be faster in a straight line without it. This might be a circuit specific thing where they think, you know what, this weekend in Canada, where straight line speed is very important, there's 3 DRS straights, and there's another reasonably sized straight as well into the hairpin, which is also pretty long, which doesn't have DRS on it. So straight line speed is key, as is slow speed performance. Very different track in many ways to the circuit of Barcelona Catalunya, right, that we were at a couple of weeks ago. It's a very heavy braking circuit as well. I think that's why Hamilton said in an interview yesterday, actually, why he thinks he's so good here is because under braking, that's been his real strength his entire career, and it's very important around Canada given the nature of the track. So to increase straight line speed and to reduce drag, they're reducing this outer tip winglet. It's probably not going to make a massive deal, but they believe it should improve flow to the rear of the car and also reduce some drag. So it should be a higher top speed. Will it have any negative effects on other parts of the track? Who knows? They used it in Spain and it was fine, but fundamentally in Spain, straight line speed is less relevant than cornering performance, whereas here it's probably the other way around. So intrigued to your thoughts on that in the comments below. Can anyone but Max Verstappen win? I know that Sergio Perez has said, well, the pressure isn't off me now that Verstappen's driving away into the distance. He still very much feels there's pressure on him, and he's putting pressure on himself, Perez, to try and catch Verstappen up, which makes sense, but it might also contribute to mistakes. Last year in Canada, Perez had a tough time in qualifying. There was that image of him like walking through the shrubbery over there. Actually, I'll just find the image now. Here you go, if you don't remember it, right, when he had to make his way back to the paddock. I mean, this image is just like, feels like a fever dream, to be honest, but this actually happened and was indeed a legitimate image. But Alonso's going to be going for the W this weekend. He admits that Lawrence Stroll's target of a double podium is very optimistic, but he believes it could be possible. We'll see in practice later on today some indication of whether this is valid or not, and Verstappen says that he likes Alonso. He's a real driver, he's an animal, and he would like him to win a race this season, but I'm sure he's not going to let that happen particularly easily. There's also been a lot of optimism from Mercedes, right, after the Spanish Grand Prix. Definitely a lot of optimism. We're making great progress with the car. After the last race, we've all been buzzing it back at the factory. The whole team has this new energy, and it feels like we have a North Star. We know where we're going, and we know how to get there. So we'll see if this weekend's a step forward or a step back, because Aston are intending to take a big step step forward this weekend, and Ferrari should be all right around here, theoretically, compared to Spain, which is a circuit that didn't particularly seem to suit them. And Russell says if they're the second fastest come race day, they will be very happy about that, but admitting that Red Bull are going to probably have the field covered as expected. Hamilton even said that Max Verstappen could well break a load of his records, and Verstappen was like, well, I'm not really thinking about that, and it's fair enough. Verstappen's at 40 wins, he's got a long way to go to 103. Hamilton obviously will want to extend this record as well in due course, but yeah, as he says, it's there to be broken. Fundamentally nowadays there's more races than there used to be, so it's more achievable to get to some of these crazy numbers that Senna and even Schumacher were setting back in, previous decades, because there's more races nowadays. But it really does depend to a large degree on what car you've got, and Hamilton knows that full well, as does Verstappen, but who knows how long this could potentially last. There's also this with Verstappen, just as we finish off the video, I thought was pretty funny, that he wanted to do the Formula 1 demo at the Nürburgring Nordschleife that Sebastian Vettel and Danny Rick are doing in September, I believe. He wanted to do it, but Helmut Marko said, no, you're not allowed to. And this is funny, right? Because Verstappen, every time he gets on the track, he pushes to the limits, right? Even in practice. That's why he's so good in practice, because he doesn't take no for an answer. Like, he's always on the limit, usually. He's always putting in a fast lap, and he's incredibly good at just getting into the car and doing a fast lap immediately. But as Helmut Marko full well knows, he knew that I would try and go to the limits. I would have loved to do it. So, Helmut Marko doesn't want to risk Max Verstappen driving in an old school Formula 1 car around the Nordschleife and risk anything happening just because, he's always going to be on the limit, Verstappen. That's just how it is. I didn't want to start unnecessary issues, and Helmut was like, no, you're not doing that. We're not risking you, and that is how it is. Quick note on the rain for this weekend. It's meant to rain possibly for second practice today, later on this evening, and probably for quali tomorrow. The race, from what I checked, it doesn't seem so likely, but things can change quickly, especially in Canada, and rain will be affecting this weekend in some way or another. So very exciting stuff. Very much intrigued to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.